Thunder Grunt.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, introduce yourselves.
I'm Jimmy George. I am a full-time script consultant and a screenwriter.
I am Jamie Nash, screen scribe.
Yes.
And I'm Bob Rose. I'm a podcaster, filmmaker, person thing.
All around awesome dude.
I'm just somebody that's floating out in the ether, waffling my way through
beautiful
life.
hair.
Secret weapon.
Gorgeous, beautiful eyes and hair.
Dude,
That's all
that
it is.
hair.
Today we're going to talk about a 14-year-old classic.
Yeah.
Brad Bird's The Incredibles.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The end.
It's essentially perfect. We don't need to say anything.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it. Thanks for listening.
I thought you were setting up like Cabin Boy or something. And I was like, that would be
I mean, I love Cabin Boy. You guys want
Me
to do a
too.
Cabin Boy
Let's do a
episode?
Cabin Boy.
It's coming
Break
out on
down the
Blu-ray, so it's relevant again.
Cabin Boy.
I'll break down Cabin Boy. But we're going to talk about The Incredibles, Cabin Boy aside for right now.
Okay.
This is I would say maybe the most notable Pixar movie of all the very notable Pixar movies.
What do you think?
I feel like
Toy Story seems kind of.
you think Toy Story that
Toy
seems like
Story,
the
I would
first,
say-
but
I'd say Toy Story because it's got 3 movies. Well,
Yeah.
Not that this
This
is much
may
of a
end up
debate.
having 3 movies.
do
Who
you
knows?
think that's the movie that people associate the most with Pixar?
I
is Toy
do.
Story?
I do. 'Cause
Okay.
It's almost like the Mickey Mouse of Pixar in some ways.
Maybe the superhero boom has jaded my eyes.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Because The Incredibles
It
is always
came
pointed at before this.
Yeah, yeah.
And it feels like The Incredibles is like being pointed at all the time. Like that
Yeah.
was the perfect superhero movie.
Yeah.
They did it already, and we're
right.
we just keep going with it. You know.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that's a good call.
What was the box office on The Incredibles, Jamie?
Why do I always drop this off right before you say it?
I even said, look.
I know.
It's
So here it is. It's $633 million. That's worldwide.
And that's
Gosh.
14 years ago.
years ago,
dollars.
so not including
Dollars.
inflation. Wow.
Yeah.
So
this
it's
is-
a bona fide blockbuster.
it's a bona fide
That's why we're
blockbuster,
talking
classic,
about it. Yes.
all around perfect piece of writing.
Oh my gosh.
But we're going to talk about why this movie.
yeah. Why this movie, Jamie?
Yeah, Jamie,
Why
tell
was this-
us why this movie.
Why are we talking about this movie?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Incredibles? I find this movie is one of the probably perfect teaching tools. Like if you want to learn basic screenwriting, it's all there. It's got character arcs. It's got theme. It's got gags. It's got structure. It's got it all. I think, and truth be told, I think any Pixar movie,
Mhm.
I haven't seen the dinosaur one.
Neither have I. The Good Dinosaur.
I really enjoy The Good Dinosaur. It's kind of not as loved, but
The
I
Cars
really enjoyed it.
sequel, I don't think
I
I,
haven't
saw.
seen
I didn't see
Cars
any of the
2.
Cars sequels.
But they are excellent teaching tools in general. I mean, you can't go wrong with Finding Nemo, Up,
Wall-E.
the Toy Story,
Stories.
Wall-E. All of these movies have like impeccable structure, great character arcs. Every single lesson in screenwriting is in them. I think a large part of it is because of the way they're made.
Yeah.
They have time to perfect the story.
Years.
It's all about the story.
It's about 5
Years.
years per movie.
5 years.
5
And
years.
and it's not like they go into post-production. They're always in storytelling mode. So, you know, they can change things out. They can swap things in. They're constantly changing the story as they go. So they're constantly being rewritten.
Also,
as
give
they
them
go.
a little credit. I mean, there's terrible animated movies that
There
aren't
are.
written well.
Yes.
That take 5 years. I'm just saying, like DreamWorks is a hit or miss.
and there's
And-
no
House.
excuse
And
because they
Pixar
have
didn't
all the
invent.
time.
Yeah, Pixar didn't invent the process
No,
of
not
how
at all.
animated
No.
films are made.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. You're right. So
And they're all relatable, so that's another thing. They always choose like relatable, like what's this movie? This movie's about like marital drama, family drama, personal discovery.
yeah,
You know, it's all like stuff. Even though they're superheroes, they make it very personal and relatable.
They
They,
seem-
they tend to do that.
they seem to be one of the first ones that kind of hit on these stories that were as much for adults as they were for kids.
Oh,
And-
definitely, yeah. It's
I mean, this is a movie with death, murder, I mean, there's a lot of adult themes in this.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like they kill people at the end.
Kill people.
Yeah, it's like straight up. It's not even a question.
I mean, the beginning gag. There's a suicide in the beginning gag.
I know.
It's a suicide. Yeah, in the prologue.
Good call.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is, I haven't watched this in about 5 years, and I watched it again for this podcast. And when the suicide came up, I was like, oh,
Whoa.
right.
Yeah.
Wow.
This wasn't playing around. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But so anyway, this movie is Brad Bird.
Yeah, Brad Bird.
His history is I'm trying
Iron
to,
Giant.
Amazing stories.
Amazing stories.
He wrote 2 episodes of Amazing Stories. One of them, my favorite.
Oh yeah, that's right. Batteries Not Included.
Yeah, and he wrote Batteries Not Included,
He
which
worked
I
on- he
fucking
worked on The
love that
Simpsons.
movie.
Worked on The Simpsons.
Yeah, so-
directed a couple episodes.
Yeah.
Sideshow
Did he
Bob.
really?
Yep.
That's awesome.
Some of the
appearance.
best Simpsons episodes. Iron Giant.
Iron Giant, which
Giant.
wasn't a commercial hit,
Commercial,
but
right.
critically acclaimed.
It's
Become a
beloved.
classic.
I mean,
Yeah.
Ready Player One, it wouldn't have used that if it wasn't a beloved movie, right? Yeah.
No.
And he said they brought him in. So this is on the Incredibles extras. It was this was illuminating to me. After all their success, they felt like Pixar was getting complacent. Like the people in Pixar, John Lasseter, felt like their storytelling was getting complacent, despite all that success. And so they brought him in to shake things up.
God, when you're at Pixar to say we're
To
getting
say,
complacent.
Maybe
that's why they're
We need to
Pixar.
shake things up, yeah. And
Yeah.
he then built his own team based around what he wanted to do with this
Right, and-
movie.
If I remember, he brought a lot of the 2D animators in. So
So they were all learning at the same time.
yeah,
because
because he wanted all that flexibility that you have in 2D animation with all the cost saving and visuals,
Yeah.
awesomeness of the 3D.
So they're all learning on the fly, which
Yeah.
is just crazy to
And
think about.
learning through conflict in some ways, like
Yeah.
both sides challenging each other, just like any good screenplay.
Man, it was shocking to me to learn about the. So I had heard a lot about how in the old school animated movies were based on the artists were the ones dictating the story, and then they figured out based on all the things that the artists would come up with, then they would craft the movie around whatever the best was left from that.
Right.
And it sort of seems like they've kept part of that. They've kind of meshed it with the standard that Pixar has set with their storytelling, like script first,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I did not know that when he would write a page, like they talk about how he would write pages and then he would bring it to the story department.
Right. Yeah. So there's it's interesting.
That was crazy to me.
There's a good book called Creativity Inc.
Mhm.
If you ever want to
I've
check
heard of it
out.
and never read it.
Really good book about the process of creativity. I don't know that it even outlines the stuff you're talking about can be found on YouTube. There's some great YouTube videos on the making of Pixar and things like that. What you described though, there's this whole thing called the brain trust
Okay.
at Pixar.
Now, would you say this is indicative of if somebody out there is aspiring to write animated movies? Would you say their expectations ahead of time would be to expect this as part of their process, even if they're trying to write a script?
So generally, the idea, if you want to be an animated screenwriter, or if you want to be somebody that writes Pixar films,
Which is a different beast than just being a screenwriter.
which is
Yeah.
a different beast.
Okay, I just want to point that out.
That's what I'm asking.
A lot of people
Yeah.
probably don't
you
know
have
that.
more insight into this
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
myself.
Generally, the advice is don't do it. It's been that way for years. And it's basically because the animators typically want to write their own stuff.
And that's what it seemed like to
And-
me when I
and
was
in this
learning
case,
about this process.
Brad Bird wrote his own stuff. Now, we've seen Michael Arndt came into Toy Story 2, and I think Josh Whedon was on Toy Story 1.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of people they bring in now, but it's typically they're established screenwriters from completely different sides of the world that they bring in to bring some emotion or something. They're not looking like, let's say you're writing The Incredibles. They're not looking for people that write superhero movies. They're looking for people that write family or whatever.
Yeah.
That's who they're looking
Maybe even
for.
comedy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because the animators actually write the films as they make them.
Work out the art. Yeah.
Because the animators are really the actors, they're the artists, they're the cinematographers, they're everything. So they like to control that. And I've been involved in a couple different animated
That's why I
films.
asked you. Yeah, I know.
It's funny. I've been involved in 2 different things. Neither project ever got to the finish line, or one didn't get to the finish line with me. I think it's still out there.
Was one that Smurfs-like thing?
It was.
I remember.
Well, that one was a live action. So
Never mind.
It was a live action mixed with animation.
Okay.
There are two others. I won't name them. Because one of them's out there. But but it was one of these things where they brought me in to work on the story, but I was working on it with a lot of other people.
Okay.
And the thought was, I remember they were going to fly me out to when they started producing the story reels, which are like animatics.
Yeah.
And that was a large part of the writing process. So the way these films are typically made, and Pixar as well, is, they might write a screenplay of some sort. In Pixar, they bring it to the Brain Trust, which is it's like an all-star team of all their directors and producers.
Yeah.
And they give feedback, and then you keep rewriting it and rewriting it.
They workshop it.
Then they might actually go to, I'm not sure if Pixar does this, but they might actually go to like a storyboard process.
That's what they did on there's some extras of him bringing
just
pages,
sketches.
like right out of finishing the pages, and then they acted out. They would decide on what they liked about it being. They would pitch him, the story department, the storyboard creators would pitch him Rises and Falls based on his pages. Here's what we want to do creatively with what you've given us, which was fascinating to me.
Okay. So
this is all in the DVD.
This is all on the extras.
Okay.
And this is common to all forms of animation, which you just said. So usually there's like a storyboard.
I had heard of
fade.
that before.
And I, some of the people I worked with, and this was really interesting for another project, is when they pitched me the story idea to be the writer on their film, like they already had like a treatment. They did it by showing me pictures. It was like a picture book. Like they sat there and talked to me, and they'd show a picture. Here's this character in its natural habitat. Next picture, and then this thing happens. Next picture.
So many ideas are already planned out, and
They have the characters. They're showing you little scenes, action, the way the action.
You're not building that world. You're
it
writing
depends on
within
the
the
project.
world.
Depends, yeah.
It depends on the project, but in that particular one, they had already had like a treatment, and they were bringing me in to kind of put it together or put the pieces together.
Okay.
And then on top of that, so then let's say you get through that phase, then they go to like an animatic phase, and the animatic tends to be visual storyboards. They turn those storyboards into movies, so they might put some After Effects things in them. And Pixar does an awesome job of this.
Yes,
I've had a couple of my things turned into animatics, and they weren't so great of jobs. In fact, they were pretty bad. But if you look at Pixar's, they're almost.
They look exactly like the finished product.
They're fun
without
to watch.
The texture.
They're fun to watch. And I found one recently, the Incredibles one on YouTube. It was probably one of the extras from the DVD.
It's on there. It's great.
It was amazing. It was amazing. And it shows some alternate paths. Like there's a completely different ending for the Incredibles and stuff like that. They show that whole thing to the Brain Trust, and it's like a 2-hour movie. Yeah. And then the Brain Trust gives notes on it. Like, we don't like that ending, switch to this. And a lot of time, like the director's doing the scratch track and things like that. In fact, that's how Edna Mode or whatever came to be. Is Brad Bird was doing the scratch track, and they never quite got anybody up to speed. But anyway, so they give a full round of story notes for that. They revise it. They keep doing that. And then it goes to like 3D skeletal versions of that. And then
they're naked. They're
naked.
They're just skeletons.
Yeah, right.
Or some of them will just be wearing like one set of clothes that don't make sense or something like that. They do that kind of thing. Whatever shortcut they have that they can project the whole movie on. And then there's another round of story notes. Yeah. So you can see there's just story note after story note after story note.
So from a writing standpoint, somebody out there, because I think I had heard all this, I knew all this, and yet I had forgotten. And then when I was watching all the extras, I was like, wow, this is so
more
much
than just,
less than the
it's
writer.
It's not just some singular vision.
Yeah. So would you, as somebody who's been involved in a couple of these, because I think that I have friends and clients who specifically want to write animated movies. That's what they want to, the path they want to go on. Would you say it kind of makes the most sense to go like the micro budget filmmaker route and like find a team of animators to help you bring your vision to life? If that's the alternative, like what would you suggest?
Yeah, that sounds
low
like
budget animation.
Oh,
I mean, that's
rough.
like the.
I know.
I'm just gonna say. I'm gonna answer for Jamie. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Just make a movie if you're gonna make a movie, but don't do low budget animation. My God.
Yep, my balls sucked inside myself just hearing you say that.
It's
like horrible.
Go look up a movie called Food Fight. Have you ever seen that? Starring with Charlie
Send my
Sheen.
balls sucked up inside of my head.
Sounded horrible.
Look, I'm trying. Well, I don't want to crush.
That's like the thing you click on Amazon Prime. You're like, nope. And like
I
3
don't
seconds
want to
in,
crush the
yeah.
dreams of anybody
'em.
out there.
No,
Crush them.
So-
Save them the time.
So don't write one. Don't write one.
I have no advice for the aspiring animation writer.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
I
what-
really don't. I really don't. It's unfortunately, I would say nobody knows anything. Probably just write your animation
And see what
screenplay
happens.
and roll the dice.
See what
That
happens.
would be my advice.
See if
'cause-
you can get your foot in
I'm
the
gonna
door.
say the most cliche thing, but a good script's a good script.
Yeah.
I mean, just write it.
Yeah.
But having it made, animation needs money. That's just there's not really. You're not gonna bend on that
Yeah,
fact.
unless you're the animator, and that would be the different.
Well, there's great YouTube animators, and they spend like 6 years doing their own movies.
Or like
sure,
South Park or something.
South
you
Park
know.
would be fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
But
Okay.
I don't know. I think they should just write their movie. And one of the things Brad Bird said, maybe it's not Brad Bird, the Pixar guys, is animation isn't a genre. So just write a good movie. You know.
Yeah, they said that they had talks about doing this live action.
Yeah,
you know?
write
Yeah.
write The Incredibles. Don't worry about whether it's animated or not.
I think
And
that's the
I think
best
that's
advice.
something.
Don't
But
don't seek out
in
to
fairness,
make it
though,
animated.
what you're saying though is the way that the process worked here. It doesn't sound like it's just not somebody at a keyboard.
Right, and that's something
Pixar wrote
right.
the
Well,
movie.
And that's something that needs to be made clear
Right.
about
That's what
your
we're trying to impress,
aspirations.
right?
Yes.
But,
yeah.
But here is the thing: they do hire I don't want to give false hope.
no.
They do hire big time screenwriters to come in and actually write the screenplay at some point.
Yeah.
They will do that, or Brad Bird will write it himself.
Right, which he did.
He's
yeah.
a big time screenwriter.
Exactly.
I mean-
exactly. So they do bring people in. The strange thing also about Pixar and animation in general, it's not governed by the WGA.
Wow.
Yeah, at all.
Really?
At
Oh.
all. Zero governance by the WGA. So you can get paid. In fact, I just listened to a podcast the other day where I think the writer of Beauty and the Beast, the original Beauty and the Beast, it was on Script Notes. She said like how much money she made from Beauty and the Beast. And I can't remember, but I think it was like $35,000 total. And that was like it.
From
Like, that was
Disney,
it?
the big Disney movie.
Yeah, because there's no residual protection or
Okay.
anything like that. And even though it's been turned into a play and all this other
Right.
stuff, she
Remade
got-
and everything.
she got no. Whereas if it was a live action, she would have gotten residuals from all of those
these
things and lots of residuals over time. I think they said they did give her like $100,000 bonus at some point. Like after the
Okay.
movie made a lot of money,
Right.
they wrote her a check.
Yeah.
But
Don't sue us.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
So if you write for animation, there's no. It's actually another guild. Actually, there's a whole complicated reason why it's not covered
Okay.
by, which we won't go into.
I think all of this is fascinating.
Yeah, but
And
It's a totally
relevant.
It's totally different than everything we've talked about on this podcast.
It's relevant,
It's a
though.
completely different process.
And at the end of the day, you don't have any credit protection. They decide who the credits are. And a lot of times they put like additional story by in animation that they do not do in live action. And the animators will get credit for some of that stuff.
I've noticed that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and that's
think
why
that's great.
you only see that on animated films.
Yeah.
You don't see it on any live action because they're not governed by the union at
Okay.
all.
Okay.
The one thing I will say, the funny experience I had, I remember one time when I went to one of these animation studios, and the culture was so different. So they were calling out like, remember when Woody Woodpecker did this? Blah blah blah. Remember that episode of Bugs
Yeah,
Bunny?
yeah.
And I could not keep up with them. It was like, kind of like how we would talk about movies.
Yeah.
They talked about individual
They were
episodes of
passionate.
Popeye or something. Or,
Well, there's a
you know,
reason they're there.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They knew
That
it
makes
all.
sense.
They had an encyclopedia. Like that's how they talk to each other. And I wouldn't be able to talk that.
So they would
language.
communicate creative decisions based on those classics.
Yeah, like we
Yeah.
need a William Fletcher, or
Yeah.
you know, and I'd be like, I don't know what that means.
Right,
But, you
right,
know, it's like, but they would know, and so there's a whole different culture and love and passion that they bring to
Yes.
it. That was kind of fascinating when I
That
met
is
them. It
interesting.
kind of gave me some weird energy. You know, it was
Yeah.
like this is good energy
Yeah.
that I hadn't had before.
Gotta break out the
I
Warner
gotta
Brothers
imagine.
cartoons.
I gotta imagine if that's what that's like at whatever studio you're talking about. That Pixar, it's got to be.
It was a really
Yeah.
small studio.
All right, but I'm saying at Pixar, that passion has got to be like tenfold,
Tenfold,
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
because
Now a lot of the small animation studios too. I mean, what they do is cut scenes for video games. Like that's what they know. They're like, it's like this from the video
I
game, blah blah
gotcha.
blah, and they, you know.
Yeah. That makes
So-
sense. Yeah.
but that small place aside, we're talking about
Back
Pixar.
about Pixar Incredibles.
And the thing that
Yes.
we're gonna discuss, not in full,
No.
about Pixar is the 22 rules of storytelling
Right.
in concordance with The Incredibles.
Yes.
Right? That's what we're going to talk
Yeah,
about.
the 22 rules, it was something that came out a few years ago, and I think people thought they were actually like Moses' 10 Commandments
I
coming
know.
down from
I
Pixar.
legitimately thought that.
Yeah, so did I.
And stone tablets.
It was only yesterday that it was crushed when I realized it was just a bunch of tweets.
Yeah.
Me too,
I
dude.
didn't realize that.
Yeah, you crushed it for me.
So it's not a Bible. It's just kind of
Yeah.
like
I think it was an editor who just kind of said,
Yeah.
hey, from the time I worked at Pixar, here are some 22 cool things I picked up.
it wasn't released like in a book form or on the website. It's not like
The-
official. Yeah, it's not.
Not at all.
But if
So-
you want, I'll put a link on the
Yeah, I think that
on
would be
this
great.
episode's page on thundergrunt.com.
They're all very intuitive.
You can
we
find.
thought we'd use them as discussion points because they're good.
They are good.
The 22
They're all
Oh yeah,
good.
they're not bad. I
They-
just thought they were like,
Yeah.
we've been following these like the Bible.
Originally,
You know?
that's
Yeah,
what I thought.
Yeah,
But and also just a reminder, whenever we talk about rules, they're tools. They're not rules. They're just additional little things you can remember when you're trying to solve a problem when creating your story. Because
no,
that's
you should know the rules and then break them.
yeah, tools not rules.
Yeah.
Tools, not rules. Exactly.
Jimmy wanted to say that
Yes, I did. Very
because it
important.
rhymes too.
Oh,
so.
because people rules. I mean, Bob, I'm sitting in front of you. You're the guy.
Oh yeah.
Rules are stupid.
Rule breaker.
Well, you got to know them though.
Yeah, no, you do.
If you're just
You do.
a new formed
What does that
baby that
mean?
landed on planet Earth and started writing a screenplay, I can't even
What
imagine what that is.
structure?
Right. Anyway,
there's-
what
yeah.
rules? What are the ones that pop out as far as these 22 that for you guys?
I think piggybacking off of the process that we were just talking about, and a lot of the, like Jamie was talking about how a lot of the rules are process based and not the actual writing. Invisible ink is rule number 12: discount the first thing that comes to mind, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and get the obvious ways out of the way. Surprise yourself. So that,
I think that's one that's hard to teach.
yeah.
It's one that
it just seems like creativity.
It's like talent. It
Yeah.
really is. But I do think you can circumvent it by forcing yourself to circumvent it.
Mm-hmm.
I always talk about story ideas in this way. A lot of people only have one story idea, and they
Mm-hmm.
come to me and they're like, "I got this one idea," and I always challenge them to come up with 100 ideas. So I'm like, I'm not sure if it's good or not, but I bet if you come up with 100 ideas and it's still your favorite idea, it's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true with not just story concepts, but beats of your story. So what's your midpoint going to be? Come up
Yep.
with 5 different ideas. Names for characters. Like one thing in The Incredibles, it has all these great names.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, they
like-
really do.
What's the
Bob
No Man
Park.
is an Island?
Gazer
Numanistan.
beam.
Gazer
Yeah,
beam,
Gazer
yeah.
beam.
Frozone.
Dynamo.
And you can
Is it right? It was
Yeah.
and you can see that whole Pixar
process.
process, like a bunch of super smart
Yeah.
creative people just pouring over
Oh
something
yeah,
and adding
and there were
to it.
probably 500 names, and they went
Absolutely.
over it like this list says: fifth, sixth, seventh. They went
Frozone.
over. It
I
and
mean-
over.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
and
That was
then-
not if somebody just walked in a room and said, "Hey, Frozone,"
But
I'd be
see,
surprised.
that's what like.
Right?
And
Yeah.
I know you guys will agree with
Probably
me. That's
Ice
what,
Guy.
Ice Guy.
Ice dude.
Don't settle for Ice Guy. Frozen.
That's
Yeah,
what we
right.
love about the movies are those little details that we take out of the things like Frozone.
And especially with The Incredibles, because it's a superhero universe. Everything's been done in the superhero universe. Maybe not back when The Incredibles was made.
It's
but
also a self-aware.
it is.
It's self-aware, right?
It is.
Mhm.
It's
I mean,
a deconstruction. It's as much a deconstruction as like The Watchmen is a deconstruction.
This is like the Happy Watchman.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very much.
Domesticated Watchman.
I love I love your idea of saying, okay, I've got a midpoint. Not just write one, write 6, 7, 8 versions of the possible things that could happen. Because I think you're right. I think a lot of people, it's sort of like a performance in a film, right? An actor comes and they're like, I'm going to say it this way. And then the director says, well, why don't you try it that way? And you have the actors who go like, no, I just want to do it this one way. This is what I want to do. But if you challenge yourself to like try alternate versions of what
Right.
you're trying to do, it ultimately ends up with something more interesting that we haven't seen and that you haven't seen, like thought of putting out there before.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of lists. So
Me
I like to
too.
make lists. I like to before I go into a project, I like to say, what are all the gags I can think of for
Mm-hmm.
this story?
The premise building.
Do you guys feel we're still talking about number 12, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Would like The Incredibles, this is not an insult in any way, but The Incredibles to me feel so straightforwardly effortless. I would never think of number 12 directly for The Incredibles because it's so
Interesting.
on the surface, straightforward, self-aware, kind of everything I would expect a perfect superhero breakdown to be.
Well-
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's weird in any way or like off the cuff or
Though I'll just give you an example.
I don't know if I'm not putting
They
it
had,
this
a,
right.
they had a different villain in the first animatic.
Okay.
Syndrome wasn't the villain.
It wasn't the villain.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had like a different villain, and Syndrome was in there, and they realized everybody was responding to Syndrome, so
Syndrome.
then they turned him into a villain. So it's a good example, and they got a better story out of it.
Yeah.
Well, he's kind
And
of
that's a huge deal.
to
They-
me,
I
to
mean,
me
they
he's
were-
the flavor of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
He gives the movie more like the family's great, but because their story is basic in like exceptional circumstances, whereas he actually is kind of the theme of the movie to me in a weird way, or the
Interesting.
second theme of the movie.
Gotcha.
The whole fandom,
Oh, the
the
fandom
premise of
aspect of
fandom, and,
yeah.
and obsession and all
Yeah.
that. Right, he's actually what gives the movie spice.
Yeah.
Ah, that's a good point.
Whereas
Yeah.
the rest of the movie,
it's pretty.
I want to
traditional.
say in the least insulting way, it's obvious.
Yeah, yeah.
Like in a good
yeah,
way.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
all very obvious. So when you're
Gotcha.
saying the fifth or sixth or seventh idea, I feel like that doesn't apply to everything in the Incredibles. Like this, out of all the Pixar movies, this is to me oddly the least odd,
Mhm.
the least weird. Does that
Well,
make sense? Does that?
I get what you're saying, but I actually think like I'll compare it to
help me out here.
to somebody who doesn't work for Pixar, right? If I were to get this script from someone who was trying to learn the process, everything that would all the rises, all of the forward momentum of the story would be successes, right? But if you watch this movie, they fuck up every single thing they're trying to do. Nothing ever goes smoothly. Like when Helen breaks into the place, she gets stuck in the doors, and like they do everything wrong.
I agree with you.
But I'm saying like,
I was talking conceptually, not story wise.
okay,
It was-
interesting. Okay,
I was talking about the concept conceptually, design wise,
hear
the
you, Bobs.
characters. That's what I meant. I don't want you to think I meant story wise.
I understand.
Yeah, that's
I
what I
missed
meant.
that.
Well,
Okay.
story-wise, I completely can see that. Though, again, I think there were major changes, like with the Syndrome thing, and there were all kinds of changes.
Who was the original villain?
I can't remember his name. It's online. They
What was his
drew him. They
deal?
pictured. I vaguely remember.
Oh, okay.
It's out there though. I mean, they did a whole animatic pass with the old villain.
Oh, okay.
So it's out there.
Was it still Jason Lee?
Well, Syndrome was a character. He just wasn't the main villain. So
He was in
yeah.
there, is what he was saying.
Oh,
and
okay.
everybody was responding. He said everybody was responding so well to him that they cut the villain and they
okay.
refocused the whole story
And,
around.
and while some things,
Maybe that's where the prologue came from.
it could be.
Yeah.
It could
Yeah.
be. And while some things, the story might be the thing that needs the third, the fourth, the fifth. Sometimes it's just the story beats.
The moments.
It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
the moments. It's the gags.
No, I'm on
it's
board
all-
for
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
it was
yeah,
more
yeah.
just conceptually to me.
Yeah.
The Incredibles seems extremely straightforward.
from a story standpoint, from a conceptual standpoint. I get you. Yeah. But I like you were going to the list, and we kind of got off the topic. You were talking about lists, and I'm a big fan of lists
Yeah,
too.
no, I mean that's really all.
Yeah.
I like to do lists all the time for gags and things. Like, what are the 5 gags? In fact, I think it's a good writer's block tool.
Mm-hmm.
If you do get blocked, just force yourself to write as many as possible, but
Yeah.
try not to worry about being good.
Yeah, it doesn't
and
matter.
actually get a little crazy. Like,
Yeah.
do the worst version, do the funniest version, do the version that doesn't belong in the movie, and some of those might actually be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, you're
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because
Never-
how I imagine so I'm not in the Pixar room, but how I imagine the approach going was, for instance, let's take the Helen trying to infiltrate the headquarters and rescue Bob, right?
Right.
How I imagine it is, how can we show her fucking up?
Right.
Like, how can this go wrong? And there was a big ass list and a discussion of all the ways they could use her powers, but all of it goes comically wrong, right? And if you watch
Like her getting stuck in the doors
all the
and
things.
all that
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
that was like probably an intense process of going through the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth until they focused upon this big loss and figured out which one was like the most interesting that we'd never seen before. You know, and I it's just a perfect example of
also
how,
working with power sets we've seen before.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
Having
they
something
have
interesting
to.
and different.
If you don't dig, we've just seen everything.
Find
right.
the cliche, throw it away. That's,
Right.
You know, I like the
Yeah.
rhymes.
Well, I mean, the whole movie is essentially a play on Fantastic Four.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I
It's a
mean,
great
if we
one.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's the best
Yeah.
Fantastic Four.
It is the best Fantastic
Right.
Four. But
Yeah.
yeah.
What's the next rule we want to talk about? Unless you guys have something else on 12.
No, do you think we talked about that?
Yeah,
enough?
no,
Yeah.
I think that's good. There is another rule I'll just tag to that is I think there's when you're stuck, make a list of what wouldn't happen. And again, it's lists. I think keeping your mind active is just a good way to, keep the dialogue going. That's the one thing. And especially when I'm working
number
with
was that?
collaborators, it is number 9.
Number 9.
When I work with collaborators or if I'm in like a kind of writer's room scenario, just keep talking. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You just, no matter how you approach it, if you're going to get silly, if you're going to get weird, just keep talking. And I think that's another way to kind of approach that.
Yeah, we do the idea books.
Yeah.
Chris and I.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
What's the next one you want to talk about?
I'm trying to find it. There were some theme related ones.
We can talk about number 3 is trying for theme is important, but you won't see what the story is actually about until you're at the end of it.
Okay. And then
I think that was actually my favorite one out of all 22.
yeah, it's a funny one though.
It's great.
It just makes it's most practical out of all of them for me.
Yeah.
You kind of get to the end, and then you kind of see what your brain did.
Yeah,
in a weird
exactly.
way.
I always
Yeah.
look at. I was saying this earlier off recording. I always look at what the success is that the characters achieve, and what that says. That's how, and then I work backwards.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that one, and then I'm trying to find it. Sorry, there's another one that said something along the lines of, "Do what you're interested in."
Oh,
It's-
why must you tell this story?
Why must you tell this?
All right,
Number
so number
14.
14 is
Okay.
why must you tell this story?
I have them all out of order, and I can't find the one I want. So that was the one. So I'm going to combine those two a little
Okay.
bit, because I think the interesting thing that you find is Brad Bird did this movie, right? And it's a superhero movie, but what is it really about? The cool part is it's kind of a guy having a midlife crisis. It's his
Mhm.
family. And that's where Brad Bird was, I guess, when he made the movie. I don't know if that's where he personally was at, but he was around that age. And you
Yeah,
figure-
Yeah.
And he really wrote an adult story. I mean, he wrote a story about a guy having a midlife crisis,
Yeah.
essentially, and how his wife reacts and how his family, reacts and all that kind of stuff. So his theme is based on that. And I guess we could talk a little bit
Also,
about his theme.
Can I throw this out there?
Sure.
I feel like this movie, in a weird way, is a really good play on infidelity.
Yes.
It reads to me. Even 14 years ago, it didn't really read to me like that. But watching it now, it had that whole like
Definitely.
he's cheating on her.
He's
type-
cheating on her. with
and he's
the-
feeling young again.
Yeah,
and
it
virile
mirrors all
again.
of those
yeah,
things.
Yeah.
But another thing, and they actually said this about the creative decision to tell this story is Pixar in general. The irony that now Disney is such a bigger entity than it was back then.
Mhm.
And Pixar didn't used to be owned by Disney, but I think it is
Right.
now.
That's right.
It
But
is
when
now,
they
yes.
made Incredibles, it wasn't.
Yeah.
So-
Disney always distributed their films,
Right. They
but
didn't own them, but now they do.
Right.
But when they
They
made
own
it,
everything.
they own everything.
Right.
I know, but there's some dramatic irony there that
Yeah.
so they said that the reason that they were driven to tell this story in the way that they did is Pixar's mantra at that time was to go against the societal and like the corporate desire to make people have a 9-to-5 job and to like silence the voices of the creative, like the special versus the mediocre. That was like one of the things that made them decide to tell this story because they felt they could do it through superheroes.
Dash.
Yeah.
Dash's story is his whole arc
Yeah.
is that story right
well,
there.
and Bob being stuck at a
And Bob,
desk.
yeah, you're right.
So they talked about that being driving them to tell this story. Yeah. So
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Yeah. And I think,
Not now though.
yeah.
Well, now, yeah, it's weird. It's a
Disney
different
now.
world. Yeah.
But you find a lot of movies that have the theme, the character arc is dad needs to care less about work and more about the family. Like
Yeah.
that's a very, very common.
Yeah.
And I think it's because up until this point in time, a lot of middle-aged white male guys with jobs wrote movies. So it's kind of like,
that's a good point.
yeah, there's a lot of guilt in there.
It was
and
just
stuff.
sharing.
It's a very common.
But this movie
Yeah,
doesn't
like-
really play. I don't feel like that. There's a neglect arc in there of
No.
as much.
What's your standard, Jamie? There's 2 types of arcs when it comes down to it.
it was funny. I was just trying to think of what that was.
You learn
I was trying
to
to-
work with others
Yeah.
and learn confidence. It's pretty much what this movie is.
Learn to care more
Learn-
or learn to be confident or something like that. I can't
Jamie
remember.
can't even
I
remember his own.
his own thing
I
that
didn't
you
invent
taught
it.
us?
When
I
he
didn't
said
invent
it in the past, I've been like, God, that's so simple.
I was-
The student becomes the master.
It's so funny though that you said that because it's just sitting here trying to be like, what was that exactly?
I heard you, dude.
Couldn't remember. Exactly. But I think it's learn to care more, or
I think it's you extended it to 3, and it was learn to have confidence, learn to work with others, and learn to care more. I
Okay.
think that was the 3, and all 3 of them are relevant. In
learn
the
to
story.
learn to work with the others might have been the one we threw in there.
Ah, okay.
But which is what this theme is. Why don't we
Yeah.
talk? Since we're in the theme territory,
I mean,
this theme's pretty obvious.
pretty obvious.
And they nail it right in the thing. It's amazing how they nail it. Like in the wedding scene, that whole "I do" beat,
yeah,
which kind of it hints at everything. And then later on, she says, what does she say to him? It's at the "I do" beat. You have to be more than Mr. Incredible.
and he says to her, you have to be more flexible.
And you have to be more flexible.
Yeah.
And
Waka
that's-
waka. It's
Waka
a great
waka.
line.
But it's so subtle.
Yeah, it's great.
And it's
Yeah.
another one of those
That's their story.
don't do the first draft. Do that
Yeah.
because that's not a first draft. kind of
Absolutely
line.
not.
That's like
That's a
the one
polish.
that's the one you find on second,
Yeah,
third,
you go,
or
oh
fourth.
shit,
You're like,
foreshadowing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Those moments when you.
And then
Yeah.
I'd say the final arc, like the after the all's lost before the third act, that's a little more like you'd get on your second draft, which is
Yeah.
which when she finally confronts him.
Yeah.
And
I agree.
yeah, and
It's
she,
less.
It's very on the nose.
Yeah, very on the nose.
yeah.
If
You
we
mean
work
when-
together,
we,
you won't have
to.
to. Yeah, he says, "I'm not strong enough to lose you," and she says, "If we work together, you won't have to."
And really, that's the theme.
That's
of
the
the whole
theme.
piece. It's,
Yeah, family.
compromise, work together.
Yeah.
You can have both worlds if you compromise.
Yeah,
which is
compromise.
kind of theme in general.
Yeah.
that's generally the way themes
It's a good
work.
point. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
but it's a very good movie to watch for how they explore theme and express it through the dialogue and the actions and the failures and victories, and also the opposition of Syndrome working against everybody by himself. He's like a one man, even though he has the assistant who ends up being on the good side of things.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
yeah. Syndrome is that's Pixar always does this. The antagonist should be the opposing theme.
Yeah, and
always.
the cool thing about
He's
Syndrome,
he's driven by he wants to be. It's for him.
Yeah.
They hit like Frozone and Mr. Incredible are like obsessed with saving humans.
Yeah.
yeah,
You
and
know, like
The greater good.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at what Syndrome's ultimate downfall is, it speaks right to the theme. Like the
Yeah.
one thing he does that, in my opinion, turned everything. Like if he didn't do this one thing, he would have won the day, and that was when he was going to let Mirage die.
Yeah.
So he went against his family.
Yeah.
And was in it for self. Like I don't care about her. I'm in
Yeah.
it for myself. You can kill my
That was
family.
the turn.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was like
and that's what failed.
kiss of
and then
death.
she looked at him and was like, "You're not my family."
Yeah.
You know. You're
And then
not
she
my-
releases
you're
Mr.
not-
Incredible.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So
Yep.
that was kind of her downfall. It's directly related to theme is Syndrome's own selfishness.
Yeah. But it's a good instructive thing to say that when you're thinking about theme, you also want to think about the villain and what the villain and how you can make the villain express the opposing theme and all of their little victories, proving that opposing theme. You know.
Yeah.
You should work for yourself and no one else. Like
Right.
every time he gets one up on The Incredibles, that's essentially what's being said.
Yeah. I mean, even to the point where the characters' powers kind of reflect their thematic or their arcs.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, Shy Violet likes to turn herself
Invisible.
Yeah.
Um,
And see, we're
Dash
saying
can't
you're saying
concentrate on anything.
you're saying it
Yeah.
that way, but it works so well.
No, it works.
Like, you know what I mean?
I'm saying it's
No,
just
it's-
it was so on the nose.
Yeah.
It almost hurts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they make it work.
They make it
dude.
work. Yeah, they totally make
Yeah.
it work.
and at some point you have to make these decisions. So theme is good DNA to use. To make those
Definitely.
decisions.
Yeah.
I also This is when I watched it again yesterday, I read Syndrome as like the opposite of the theme of Spider-Man.
Interesting.
I mean, in the end, I was like, Syndrome is incredibly powerful. He's is a
Comes
genius.
no responsibility.
He has no responsibility. Yeah, I just read that.
With great power comes no responsibility.
I haven't rewatched this movie in a long time,
That's
and
awesome.
The infidelity thing read to me.
Oh, yeah,
there's a lot of
definitely.
new stuff I picked up.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, the
fanboy side of things, the commentary on fanboys,
well,
I didn't pick up.
We could talk about that for hours.
Yeah, not on this
Imagine
one,
Syndrome in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
You know, right? Is there any more of the rules you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, well, so we didn't talk about this is the longest one, but we don't have to talk at length. If
Which
that
number?
Is
what
rule
is
number
it?
1, and this is the fairy tale thing, right, Jamie?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's not just for Pixar, but
No, not at all. And I've seen this in many places, and
Yeah.
I think it's a great way. I show this when I teach screenwriting. I show this to my students, and almost always they're very attracted to this little plan.
Read it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Read it.
Once upon a time, there was every day, blank, one day, blank, because of that, blank, because of that, blank, until finally, blank.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a couple things going on here with that. First of all, if you ever see that South Park video, in the video is that one where they say there's one rule of screenwriting that we learned, and it's instead of
Therefore,
they list all the bits. Therefore, if you Google
Causation.
Put Google South
And
Park
consequence.
writers and
Yeah.
He says,
screenwriters.
It's fantastic.
You don't say and then. You say and therefore.
Therefore.
Yeah, you should say therefore.
Yeah, or because of. or
Because
whatever.
of and therefore. Yeah.
And that's what this forces you to do. This forces you to put your story into those terms. So it's not just a bunch of random events.
Yeah.
It's not like Mr. Incredible fought, Syndrome.
Yeah.
Mr. Incredible fought this guy. Mr.
Right.
It's forcing you to tell a story. It's forcing you to set up dominoes that you're going to
Yeah.
knock down in your story. So this is a really simple way. If you hate all the other things, if you hate Blake Snyder's beat sheet, if you hate Truby, if you hate all these things, this is a simple way you could sit down right now and probably within 30 minutes come up with some structure for your thing.
Yeah.
I actually have used
With number
it
1.
with
Number
sorry?
4. That's what this one is.
This is number 4?
Number 4.
Oh, I thought we were
number
talking about
4.
number 1.
Yeah, no, this is number 4.
Okay.
So number 4, it's a very simple way. It's a very simple structure. You'll find it out there. It's fill in the blank. It's like
Yeah.
a Mad Lib.
Yeah.
And give it a try. And I've actually seen it work with The Godfather and very complex, forms, just to break it down.
Can we fill it out?
Yeah, so
for The Incredibles?
first I'll
Yeah.
kind of break it down a little more, and then we can go into The Incredibles depending on how much you want to go into it. But just a little expansion upon each one. So Once Upon a Time is your setup. It establishes everything the audience needs to know about the realities of the world of your story. So like the rules of the world and the characters who inhabit it, right?
The
And
prologue,
then,
right?
For this is the prologue.
Yeah.
And every day it supports the setup.
Yep.
So it's just an extension of
It's
what
the
you
ordinary
set up.
life.
Right, the ordinary life, the
Day-to-day.
the patterns in the characters' world.
Right. And then I usually hear the next one say until one day. They
Yeah.
just put one day in this.
Yeah, I actually wrote until one day
Until one
because I
day,
have
yeah.
heard it that way too. And it could be either or in my opinion, and the inciting incident happens, or it could be the point of no return, which is like the end
It
of
could
Act
be.
1, like
Mhm.
Luke and all of his aunt dying and stuff.
Mhm.
That's less of an inciting incident and more of the turning point.
Sure.
Until one day Luke's aunt and uncle were dead, and what else could he do? An inciting incident or point of no return happens that requires action, right? So it requires that they do something to move the story forward. And because of this, so now you're into Act 2.
Right.
So that's all Act 1 stuff, okay? Now you're into Act 2. And because of this, and then Act 2 is split by this setup, by rule number 4, it's split into 2 sections, right?
Mhm.
So the first section is...
And by the way, usually when I see this, it could be many because of
Oh,
that.
it could be, and because of,
it
and
could
because
be
of,
10,
because of. I
yeah,
mean, that could
it's-
be every fucking
it-
scene.
Just because it says 2 here, you can
Yeah.
use 10. If you
Yeah,
want.
I mean, you could write your whole Act 2 based on.
Yeah.
And,
How many
and
because of that does The Incredible have?
Oh, Jesus.
It just depends on how deep you want to dive.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, you could you could either summarize it like a because of that he goes on a mission, or you
Right,
could,
yeah.
Okay, you can go in there.
Yeah.
You break it down even
And
further.
then,
Okay.
and because of this, the reaction and consequences of reacting to the inciting incident or point of no return. And because of this, the reaction and consequences of, like you said, an endless number of events, or you can just break it down simply into two if you're trying to like write a synopsis and grow from there. And then the last one is well, there's two more. Until finally, and until finally kind of like covers the whole third act.
Yeah,
That's the climax, right?
Right.
And then
The 1 point climax.
right. It's
Until
just
finally.
like the Save the Cat. Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
mixing terms here, but
until finally the Death Star was destroyed by Luke Skywalker.
yeah,
Right. Yeah, okay.
exactly. And ever since that day, and that's the denouement, which a lot of beginning writers don't do the denouement.
Yeah. Some
Yeah.
people want to end it right at the thing, and sometimes that's okay.
Yeah,
It
that's
depends on
okay.
the film.
I feel like a lot of
A hard
movies do end until finally.
Yeah,
It happens. Credits roll.
yeah.
Hard rock song starts playing.
The denouement is
Right, yeah.
is the curtain. Everybody bows. That's the denouement. You get one last moment to see what everybody's up to now that everything's right in the world, or the opposite in a down ending story. What's everything wrong? Like Requiem for a Dream. Their denouement is like so depressing. You know,
You could have like almost a mix of that, like with Die Hard.
yeah.
There's
That's a good
kind
call.
of-
Yeah,
There's kind of a denouement, but there's also like the end of the story.
Yeah.
You know,
Sometimes the Ever Since That Day more hints like what the future that we never see is
That's
going to be.
right.
You know?
That's true.
Like
Yeah.
John McClane and his wife lived happily ever
Right.
after.
Yeah, it's or
yeah.
even like in the credits of Can't Hardly Wait, where they have the yearbook thing. That
Yeah,
says, this
yeah.
Or
person did that.
once again, I'll mention it. Wayne's World.
Yes.
On this podcast, I mentioned Wayne's World way too often. We
It's
could
a great
actually you could
movie.
actually show other endings.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, yeah.
So I don't know how much you want to go into, how in depth you want to go into the Incredibles.
I think we could do a simple one.
simple
Just do a
one.
very simple one.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Just
So
keep the because of that's down to like
Yeah.
below 5.
yeah. So Once Upon a Time, and this is the prologue,
Yes.
and it's also that's probably just Once Upon a Time is the prologue, right?
Once upon a
Well,
time,
here-
there was a superhero in a world full of superheroes
Well,
named Mr. Incredible.
Here's the interesting thing. Like if I
Yeah.
did it, I'd probably skip the prologue, which tells me it's a prologue. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So if I was breaking the story, I'd probably be Once Upon a Time there was a family of superheroes who hid their powers
But-
from the world.
Jamie, I
Yeah.
think they need the prologue for Syndrome. I think after what you told me,
Yeah.
I feel like that exists for Syndrome.
I
Yeah.
agree that
That has
you
to.
could
And
cut.
it grew out of
Because he's not
deciding.
in like
Right.
Act 2 that much
No,
at all.
No.
So-
but
Agreed.
again,
Right.
this because this is a summary, we're hiding a lot of the details.
The
So
little
I guess my
beats.
point, like
yeah.
you, in theory, with what I'm going to pitch, you could hide Syndrome somewhere else. You could
Yep.
set Syndrome.
I agree with
he
you.
could show up one day and say, "You're
Right,
Mr.
right,
Incredible, and I love you." And, you know,
Right.
you could do a different thing.
But I think it came to a point
I,
where
I
they
agree with you. I think there is a version of this movie that you can imagine that cuts the prologue, and the one thing that you have to figure out that you have to put somewhere is Syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm
The
not
ti-
saying it'd be
but
better. to
The
cut
thing
it.
with the prologue though is good is there's a lot of time in between. You need Syndrome to go
Yeah.
away and have time to go insane,
Yeah.
or else it doesn't really work.
Yeah,
You know.
no,
Yeah.
no.
And if you start with like them already being a family,
Yeah.
how could he be a child that's obsessed with Mr. Incredible?
right.
Yeah.
You
Well,
just
There are a lot of bad ways you could patch it. You could have like a flashback type thing, or
Yeah.
footage, or videos, or blah blah blah. You know, I used to be a fan of yours. You know, monologuing. There are bad ways.
he
you
shows up as like a friend and he's
Yeah.
been obsessed
Yep.
with him since.
Yeah.
but
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
not saying. I'm not saying that would be better.
This is
I'm
probably the
just saying-
cleanest of those options.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
just adding this little
Yeah,
prologue.
because they're brilliant.
Also, it's world building.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Well,
builds
gives us,
world.
So-
Yeah.
So the only thing I'm saying is my alternative approach will be I'm cutting the prologue and I'm saying there was a family of superheroes who
Yep.
hid their
Who are you to
superpowers.
question
Right.
Pixar?
The
I'm just kidding.
the before world.
If I was in the brain trust, the prologue would be done.
Which I should be.
Exactly. I would have said, "Take your Woody Woodpecker," and
Now there's a great movie. No.
so anyway, there's a family of superheroes who hid their powers from the world and tried to maintain an ordinary life.
All
or
right.
something like that.
And every day.
Well, they didn't just hide. It was legal. They were forced to hide.
They were
forced
forced
to
to.
I think forced is an important part
yeah,
of this.
yeah.
Forced.
That's in the
Yeah.
yeah. Agreed.
Again, I'm not trying to.
He's
I know,
breaking
I
a
know.
basic.
I'm sorry.
This
I
is
know.
this is what I would
We're trying
be
to burn
writing
through
if the movie didn't exist.
Yeah.
You're right.
Okay. So and every day.
And every day, why don't I have
Bob
it?
works a boring insurance job.
Exactly.
Helen struggles to balance taking care of the house and the kids
Being
while
a mom,
Bob
and a wife,
mom and a wife while
yeah.
Bob is off having a midlife crisis.
The
Yep,
teenage
same
girl
here.
feels invisible, and and the
and
boy feels restless.
Dash uses his powers for bad instead of good.
Yeah.
Because he is not allowed to be himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Until one day.
Until one day, and I actually think this is the inciting incident, and it comes late as shit in this movie.
I probably agree.
31 minutes.
Yeah. Again,
Bob which is really late.
Yeah.
But it works so well.
Again, partially because of the prologue.
The prologue's 14 minutes. So
Yep.
there you go.
Some great movies don't follow
I
structure.
know. That's why this is a great example.
If I may point
Well,
to another
it's-
example,
It's rock solid still.
another example that I
structure.
actually know the time marker. In Rocky, he doesn't get challenged until 55 minutes in.
Dude, that's insane.
Right?
So
I mean,
yeah.
you don't always have to.
No, that's why this is
yeah.
a great example. So until one day, Bob finds a mysterious package and is offered a job that will allow him to potentially be Mr. Incredible again, use his superpowers and
get paid.
Get paid and relive the good old days, which that's all he's about. Yeah.
Right. And because of that, in my version, I did the real skimpy version where because of that, he goes on the mission and gets captured.
That's
right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you know
yeah.
what?
That's
that
what happens.
brings
It's
it
fine.
down, man.
That's the midpoint.
Yeah.
Did you write a
Yeah.
novel of this stuff?
No, I just broke down the beats.
Oh,
Sounds
okay.
like you did the same.
It's a beats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just broke down every beat. No big
Straight
deal.
A student, Jimmy
Yeah,
George.
dude. Yeah, that's deconstructing is, dude. I'm passionate.
I know,
about
yeah.
it.
That's
yeah.
one.
That's
of
what
the,
you
That's
do.
one of the rules, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so it's a 2-part midpoint.
Yeah.
So it's Helen calls Bob and finds out that he's been lying to her, and he has been working there for a long time.
That's
And
right. That's right.
And then Bob finds out that it's weird to say Bob because you're sitting across from
I
me.
know.
That's the guy.
Bob finds out
The real Mr.
Syndrome's
Incredible over
grandmaster
here.
plan that he's been killing superheroes to build the perfect robot, and and then he gets captured.
Yep. And I mean, again, my version's very simple, sticking to Mr. Incredible's POV. But
Yeah.
then it just goes, and because of that, his family has to come together and use their powers to save him.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah, you're
that's-
going broad
I'm
strokes.
going-
No, but
Yeah,
that's
broad, yeah.
that's the whole second part of Act 2.
Yeah,
like
yeah. I
definitely.
kind
That's
of-
what it's all about.
It's the high level version that
Yeah.
you might want to come up with, like I said, in 10 minutes after you read this for
Yeah,
your info.
exactly.
Until finally the family learns to compromise, use their powers, but still maintain their ordinary life. And ever since that
Exactly.
day, they live together as both superheroes and a family. Or
Yeah.
something like that.
Exactly.
Dash can play sports.
Yeah,
and
Dash
she can
is
be
allowed
seen
to be
and- yeah.
himself.
Until
She's
the sequel.
flexible,
Right.
and Bob has learned to be not just strong, but also a father and a husband.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
there
Yep.
you go.
Let me ask you guys this. So that's where
That's where we're at.
That's
Yeah,
where
man.
we're at.
okay. Now, there's one question I want to ask you guys because this is the only thing that I really thought about when I was watching the movie.
Okay.
What role, structurally and even character-wise, does Frozone play? Because he's the only thing from doing this podcast and thinking about this and rewatching the movie. I love Frozone. Who doesn't?
Right.
But I kind of, other than him being buddy with Bob and going out,
I think that's what it is, though.
is that the only?
It
yeah.
shows what happens when he works with others, the people that he cares about.
You think?
Yeah,
I don't know if that
yeah,
was the theme
yeah.
of those scenes, but okay.
Yeah, it shows like I
Really?
think,
Okay.
yeah.
I question that, but
Yeah, I don't know. I think
Jamie,
so.
do you?
I don't know.
I'm pulling it out of my ass.
I'm throwing it at you guys because it was something that occurred to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Frozone.
In the
also-
end battle, he really doesn't do
he
much.
doesn't do much.
Yeah.
Because you don't want him at that point. You want the family. There's enough with the family.
Yeah.
I think he represents like a different reaction to that situation with his wife. Like, you know how he's
Mhm.
The super suit.
yeah,
thing,
yeah. I think
yeah.
he's a different side of how Bob could have reacted. Like
Yeah.
maybe he's the opposite side of
Bob,
how Bob
yeah.
could have
'Cause-
reacted. Like only listening to the wife, only, you know, or whatever.
Because he doesn't want to relive
But he's
the
not
old
listening to
days.
his wife. He's out there doing it with
He is,
Bob.
but he's scared about it. And he wants
Yeah,
to go
he's
home
not
and-
the
But so is
same.
Bob.
Not the same. He's not driven by personal desire to be the man he once was. He's driven by I just want to help people.
If I'm remembering
Well,
correctly,
so I think you don't think Bob is too.
Bob is trying to.
He's trying to
deeper.
recapture, but he
Yeah.
also cares.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
see, I
okay.
remember Frozen as
I'm playing devil's advocate a little
I
bit.
love that
It's-
when you
yeah.
do that.
It's been a while, but I I remember Frozen as more the dissenting opinion. Like, what if we just went bowling? Bowling's
Yeah,
fun.
He does say that. He
Yeah.
does say
So,
he's
so
kind of.
I got a feeling that he
not
was
as
more
daring.
dragged out by Mr. Incredible. That he
Mhm.
really wanted to go.
Yeah, exactly.
That was my take on it.
Yeah.
Yes, and he does play that like small role. I guess when I was rewatching the movie, he was the only part I was like, you could probably.
He's a
get rid
window
of...
character. Have you ever heard
yeah,
that
yeah,
phrase?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could probably cut Frozone out and it'd still be a great movie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Even though Frozone's awesome, and I wouldn't want to lose Frozone. You know.
Yeah. But it allows the
Yeah.
audience. I think you're right.
It also gives Bob someone else to be with,
Yeah, other than his family.
other than his
Yeah.
family.
Well,
like
that's
his,
a very good point because he's having a secret life.
and he needs somebody
So
to be
you
secret
need
with.
to express that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
It's kind of weird that Frozone isn't almost with him on the journey.
Yeah, no, I know.
Like that, I think
it could have gone there.
like Frozone gets captured with him, and then
Yeah.
kind of. But
Yeah.
then it
Look
would
what
be
you got me into.
it'd be more impersonal and about the two of them.
yeah.
Then I guess
It'd become a buddy movie. Yeah.
You'd probably have to bring his wife into it and all
Yeah,
kinds
she'd
of
have to
more
be an actual
characters.
character. It'd be
Yeah.
a little
It
bit
just
busier.
complicates it.
That
but
might have been
it's a good
talked
point.
about.
I'm
If-
sure
if,
in the
if they were as intense in those think
yeah,
tanks,
I'm sure.
absolutely, it was
that
talked
has
about.
to have been talked
There's
about.
45 minutes of deleted scenes.
Yeah,
in
that
this
has to
movie.
have been part of it.
45 minutes.
I would love to watch them
Yeah,
just
they're on there.
to see if there's any Frozone discussion.
Even the animatics, the cut animatics are entertaining.
Yep.
So I could see watching the full 45 minutes of
Yeah.
Frozone or whatever it is.
That's fine. Yeah.
I think we covered everything.
Yeah, I was gonna say
so.
you guys talked about all the rules that
that
you
we
wanted
to talk about. That we felt like they were worth
skipped
it.
some.
Yeah, we skipped about 18.
Yeah. There's a lot of rules. Go read the rules. They're
Yeah.
all good.
They're
I'll
all
put a
very
link on
good.
the episode page. So if you
They're
go
all
to
very
thundergrunt.com, find this episode, there'll be a link for to one of the pages that lists these tweets. They're tweets.
Tools, not rules.
There's even YouTube videos.
There's YouTube
based
videos
on
that
this,
explain
yeah.
it very
Yeah.
well and everything.
with examples
watching.
and yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. Yeah.
Is there
and
any-
and the Michael Arndt. That's worth talking about.
Oh yeah, that's right. There's a Michael Arndt video that's like Pixar's rules for good beginnings.
He made it.
that he came up with. There's also another Michael Arndt video going around right now that's Michael Arndt's rules for good endings, which he's kind of infamous for. He came up with this lecture that's really good if you can find it. It's on Vimeo.
Yeah, look those up. They're very instructive.
Is there anything else you guys want to say about Brad's Bird's almost flawless
You know,
screenplay?
There's one. Let me see if I can find
Yeah.
it. There's one last rule that I think sums this one up good. And I can't find why. There's too many of these rules. There's too many of them in 22.
22 is a weird number too.
It
It
is.
just is. Just
Blame
boil it
the
down
tweeter.
to 20. I do. That's why I think if Pixar was going to release them, they would have done 20 or probably 10.
Yeah, 22 is. Just
It seems
crazy.
like, you know what's funny is it seems like the list itself wasn't workshopped.
No, I know.
That's what it is.
Well, the funny thing was, it was written by an editor who didn't edit.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
That's funny.
But there's one, and now I can't find it. But it's,
Bob, what do you want to talk
here it
about
is.
while Jamie's looking?
I found it. Number 10. Pull apart the stories you like. What you like in them is a part of you. You've got to recognize it before you can use it.
Ah.
So that's what we do. So I think that's our mission statement.
ethereal, isn't it? Almost, it sounds like a therapy session.
So a lot of screenwriters will say that the only way to learn screenwriting isn't through the stuff we talk about here, but to just go through movies, break them down. A lot of people, you know, back in the day when there wasn't an internet and there wasn't all these Save the Cat books and things like that, they literally just went through and watched television shows, they watched movies, and they wrote the beats on a piece of paper and they thought about them. There's a whole host of people that have done that.
I was gonna say
Screen- and learned
Tarantino.
these.
I didn't go to film school. I went to films.
So go take the movies you love, write it down, try to crack what you love about
Why
them.
do you like them? Yeah.
How they work, what they're doing,
Yeah.
and that's really
The
the
fight
best
scenes.
The mechanic. Like my dad, I don't watch movies for characters.
Yeah, we're putting big words around, or not big words, but we're putting canned words around basically doing that.
Yeah.
So go do that.
Yeah.
Steal from your heroes.
Steal.
That's the lesson we've learned.
Yeah.
Watch Bugs Bunny cartoons.
right.
And don't write an animated
Is there
screenplay.
what is the
Yeah, don't write it
what's
in.
the actual lesson we learned?
I learned that it's probably not a good idea to aspire to write feature-length animated films.
That sounds
I learned I have to write down those 2 character arc things that I couldn't remember.
Yeah, dude, those
Don't
are
forget.
fantastic.
And I learned that I need to respect Frozone more.
Yeah.
I love Frozone. That's fine. All right. I think,
All right.
I mean, there's really nothing else we
Yeah.
can say. I mean,
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
thank you for
Its
listening.
bones.
Yeah.
The Incredibles is in 2 is in theaters now, and it needs your help. It's struggling.
Yeah, it's really struggling.
We need to complete the trilogy.
Oh,
Yeah,
God.
right. Show them we care. Together, we can do it. We can succeed as a family of fans. All right. Bye.
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 You have just listened to Writers Blockbusters, a screenwriting podcast featuring 2 professionals and another guy. Available only on Thundergrunt.